Some stories happen because a writer gets inspired by some wild idea that needs expression. Some stories are carefully put together as part of a greater whole. And some stories you write because a professional friend asks you if you want to contribute to an anthology and it sounds like a really fun idea. This is how the next tale was born. I needed a Weird West story so that I could contribute to Straight Outta Tombstone. The upside of putting this project together is that the late 19th century was largely a blank slate in the universe of the Dresden Files, so I was able to do whatever I wanted without being restricted by the 1.5 million words of story that had already been written. The downside was that the late 19th century in the universe of the Dresden Files was largely a blank slate, so I had to start figuring out how to braid this story thread in particular into the greater story. One of my go-to concepts when writing earlier eras of any story is to focus on characters who are the passionate young hotheads in any given setting. Those are the people who generally provide me with the most interesting choices and stories. So, for this story, Anastasia Lucio fit the bill perfectly, and I've always loved the character and wished she could have more stage time. I worked out her early history as a young warden and decided that she had been instrumental in the White Council's decades-long war with and victory over the greatest necromancer of the previous millennium. This is the start of what is now, in my head, a 4 or 5 book story all on its own. I don't know that I'll ever get to write that tale of dark old Western supernatural horror featuring Anastasia as the magical and gunfighting protagonist, flanked by such figures as Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday of the Venatori Umbrorum. But it's a hell of a good movie in my head. So maybe imagine as you read this next piece that the movie begins here.
The American West was not the most miserable land I had ever traveled, but it came quite near to it. It was the scenery, more than anything, that drove the spirit out of the body. Endless empty plains that did not so much roll as slump with varying degrees of hopelessness, with barely a proper tree to be seen. The late summer sun beat the ground into something like the bottom of an oven. "I grow weary of Kansas," said my nut horse. "The rivers here are scarcely enough to keep me alive." "Hush, Carl," I said to the Nakin. "We are near to town, and to the Warlock. I would prefer if we did not announce our presence." The Nakin sighed with a great exaggerated motion that set the saddle to creaking, and stomped one hoof on the ground. With a pure white coat and standing at a lean and powerful 17 hands, he made a magnificent mount, as fast as the swiftest mortal horse and far more tireless. "As you wish, Anastasia." "Warden Lucio," I reprimanded him tartly. "And the sooner we watch this creature and his master, the sooner you will have served your probation, and the sooner you may return to your homeland." The Nakin flattened his ears at this reminder of his servitude. "Do not you become angry with me," I told him. "You promised to serve as my loyal mount if I could ride you for the space of an hour without being thrown. It is hardly my fault if you assumed I could not survive such a ride under the surface of the water." "Humph," said the Nakin, and he gave me an evil glare. "Wizards." But he subsided. Murderous monsters, the Nakin, but they were good to their word. It was then that we crested what could only quite generously be called a rise, and I found myself staring down at a long, shallow valley that positively swarmed with life. Powdery dust covered the entire thing in a vast cloud, revealing a hive of tarred wooden buildings that looked as if they'd been slapped together over the course of an evening by drunken teamsters. Then there was a set of gleaming railroad tracks used so often that they shone even through the dust. On the northern side of the tracks stood a whitewashed mirror image of those buildings, neat streets and rows of solidly built homes and businesses. Corrals that could have girdled the feet of some mountains were filled with a small sea of cattle, being herded and driven by men who could scarcely be distinguished from their horses beneath their mutual coating of dust. To one side of the town, A lonely little hill was crowned with a small collection of grave markers. And the people. The sheer number of people bustling about this gathering of buildings in the middle of nothing was enough to boggle the mind. I sat for a moment, stunned at the energetic enormity of the place, which looked like the setting of some obscure passage from Dante, perhaps a circle of hell that had been edited from the original text. The warlock I pursued could take full advantage of a crowd like that, making my job many times more difficult than it had been a moment before. "So," said the Nakin sourly, "that is Dodge City."